On today's Newsmakers, chaos in Nigeria, a free speech victory, and Charlie Kirk conspiracies, that and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with your favorite entertainers, pastors, politicians, and other notable figures. First up on today's show, Brad Brandon. He is the head of Across Nigeria, and he reveals that terrorists are going after him. Now, here's why he is boldly refusing to stop his work. Let's welcome Brad to Newsmakers to share his perspective. Brad, there's a lot to talk with you about today. You are heading back to Nigeria. You spend a fair amount of the year there on the ground. What does it feel like to know? I mean, you have a choice. You're leaving America, the confines of America, the comfort of America, to go back to a place that is dangerous. What does that feel like for you?
I'm used to it at this point. Just recently, we escalated our security advisory level to a level 4. Internally within our organization. That's a red level 4. So that's the highest security risk level that we operate at. And then earlier today, we were alerted by the U.S. Embassy and the State Department that there were credible threats against U.S. affiliated schools and facilities. And that's exactly what we are. So it makes me a little concerned, but I trust the Lord that we're doing what he called us to do, and there's no safer place than that.
It's Across Nigeria is your organization. We've had you on many times before to talk about the work that you are doing. And when I look at this and I see what you just said, obviously there's a lot of bravery in this, but you also know for a fact right now, and I want you to share whatever you're comfortable sharing and whatever you can, that there's essentially a bounty specifically on your head. There are groups coming after you with the effort to stop and potentially kill you. Can you explain how you found this out and what is happening there?
Yeah, those threats are basically contracts that Boko Haram has established or taken out, however you want to view that. 3 credible that we know of. And we find out about that. We're in contact with Boko Haram fairly regularly. We have insiders inside of Boko Haram that feed us information. Boko Haram throughout the year will send us 4 or 5 videos of them executing Christians. We get those videos all the time.
Why are they sending you those? To intimidate you? They're trying to intimidate.
Yeah. They're trying to intimidate us. In fact, when I was working in Maiduguri last year, they sent me a video of Christians being beheaded. That was a new video that had been released. And what they were just trying to do was to scare us out of the area. So we find out about those contracts through those avenues. We take necessary precautions. We never take foolish risks, but we also have to do what God has called us to do. This time going back, to be honest with you, it makes me quite a bit more nervous because we're getting many reports of unrest in northern Nigeria since the United States action in Iran. There's a lot of protesting the death of the Ayatollah. A lot of the stuff that Boko Haram and ISWA in northern Nigeria are doing was or is funded by organizations and the Iranian government. So there's close ties there.
So there's protests in Nigeria in support of the Iranian regime that is still sort of in power, right now, and fighting back. So because of the radical Islamic ties, you're going back to a situation that's even more fiery. And have you had these sorts of, you said there's 3 credible threats. Have you had this number of threats on your head before in the past?
Not to this level. We've had loose, discussions about different things that we've heard, but nothing definitive. These are 3 definitive contracts that I know of that have been taken out on me. Some of them are to kidnap me. Some of them are to kill me. It just depends. Hopefully I run into the guys who just want to kidnap me, but
and you seem completely at ease. And again, it's because you know that you're called to do this. It is dangerous work. How long will you be back in Nigeria?
I will be in Nigeria for about 3.5 or 4 months this time. It's been a while since I've been back. I had to forego my fall trip because of all the media firestorm that happened. So I want to capitalize on that to raise awareness of the genocide that's going on. So heading back now, and I'll be coming back in about 4 months.
Wow. Okay, so you're going there for months, and you obviously are aware of these threats. You are going to, I would assume, take as much action as you can to protect yourself. I don't want to hammer this on, but what keeps you going? Because it is, you're out there, you're doing, and you could talk a little bit about the work you're doing, because I know that's probably what's keeping you going.
Sure.
But knowing, I mean, most people would say, this is crazy. I'm not going back. I don't want to die. I don't want to be kidnapped. I'm not doing it.
I always tell Christians this. I say, number one, seek after what God called you to do. Find out what God is calling you to do. Then when you find out what he's calling you to do, spend the rest of your life fulfilling your calling. But the third thing that I'll add to that is you got to get to the place where you realize that what he called you to do is bigger than you are. And when you come to that realization, when that's been revealed to you, everything else goes to the wayside. Everything else is small compared to that calling, that thing that he called you to do. So I operate in that. I'm fully aware that what he called me to do and the difference that we're making and the things that we're doing are far bigger than I am, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you also had shared, and I'd love for you to read this. In addition to the threats against you, there was also an alert that was sent. Can you tell us where that came from and read that for us?
Yeah, so I just got an alert that it was last night that informed us. It was from the United States Embassy in Abuja, and then the State Department also confirmed that. But credible threats against U.S. affiliated facilities and schools, specifically those two things, facilities and schools. Well, we operate a U.S. affiliated, our refugee facility in Nigeria, plus our subsidiary facilities. And one of the main things we do is schools. We fund and operate schools in northern Nigeria. Those are U.S. affiliated schools. So we're going to go back, and I'll get dropped right into the middle of a war zone, it sounds like.
Brad, we'll be praying for you as you embark on these months in Nigeria. And we thank you for, just being brave and being willing to do what a lot of other people would not do.
Hey, thanks, Billy. It's always good to be on with you.
Let's continue to pray for Brad Brandon and against the persecution happening in Nigeria. You can go to acrossnigeria.org for more information on Brad's work. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, Matthew Grech is an ex-LGBTQ activist who is now a Christian, and he shares a major victory that he had after being brought up on charges in Malta for reportedly sharing his journey out of a gay lifestyle. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers to explain what unfolded. There's big news because you just won your case. This was a years-long legal battle. Let's first start there. What does it feel like after all of this fighting and obviously facing very serious consequences to have actually been victorious in this?
Well, it feels really good, and it feels like it's a result of the faithful prayers of the saints all around the world. I have mixed feelings. I'm thankful. However, it felt like the process itself was the punishment. And my question is, okay, do we now have freedom of speech around this issue in Malta? Because really, if it was freedom of speech, I would not have had to go through a 3-year process in a criminal court for the first time in my life. So my call is for the ban on so-called conversion practices to be revoked in Malta, and for the European Commission to prevent it from entering every state in Europe, because I feel like I was punished for an honest conversation that was very healthy for a democratic society around sexuality and gender.
Well, and that's sort of the thing here, and we'll get into some of what you think the end result of this legal win will be. But for those who don't know, let's sort of back into your story a little bit here, because back in 2016, Malta became the first European Union country to ban attempts to, quote, change, repress, or eliminate a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, and or gender expression, right? So there was this attempt to sort of restrict that. And what happened to you was that you shared your story and it led to a legal battle. So take us through, and I know you've shared this before, but I think it's important so people understand what it was that led you to this. What happened that really led to the legal battle in the first place?
So I had many opportunities to share my story in Malta of leaving homosexuality, finding Jesus. But what was different this time is that I mentioned an organization that supports men and women away from all things LGBT into living a life that is consistent with their values, uh, in terms of living according to their biological sex, or living, uh, affirming themselves as heterosexual because they choose to do so. And because I and the hosts mentioned the organization, all three of us ended up being accused and charged with advertising conversion practices. So that is really what led to the Silvana Juice, who is actually the cabinet expert of the European Commissioner Helena Dalli. He was triggered, and he brought some people together to report us as well. So it was three people to report us to the police, and it felt very political because he has definitely a political history, and he was behind some transnational policies in the area of LGBT. So he's a lawmaker himself.
Yeah, and so you go through this whole entire legal battle. How long did it take to win this? I mean, how many years were you fighting this?
So, good question, Billy. I had 17 court appearances, faced several adjournments along the way. So it's been just over 3 years, and it was meant to be summarized proceedings. So it was all meant to be resolved in one day. And I think to myself, so many serious cases in court. People are fighting in things related to divorce and murder, and here we are, having 3 years in court about what? A simple conversation around sexuality and gender. And the hosts of the program didn't even agree with me on everything. So it was very balanced. It was representing different views. It was very healthy. And it's very sad to see the shutting down of alternative viewpoints.
Even if you were all in agreement, you were simply sharing your story. And if there are people who are looking for freedom, or they're looking to leave a certain lifestyle, the idea that the government would restrict people from being able to talk about that in a private setting, or in a public venue, is so bizarre and wild to me. So 17 court appearances. What was it that kept you going? Because a lot of other people would give up and sort of try to come up with some agreement just to get out of this, because it costs time, money, resource, attention. It's stressful. You were facing, again, jail time, were you not?
Yes, I was facing jail time, with the potential of being in jail for 5 months or a €5,000 fine, and it's the same with the co-accused. So I think I had no option because I didn't pick this fight. It was the police, the Malta police, that acted on the report that they received, and frankly, they didn't know the law at all. Some of them, they heard about it for the first time. So, there was definitely external pressure and political pressure there. And I don't think we can undermine the severity of that. What kept me going is Jesus, the grace of the Lord, the strength, and the prayers of well-meaning brothers and sisters all around the world. It really fortified not just me, but also my legal team. We were getting advice as well from some of our friends in the UK at Christian Concern. So we did our best, and we believed in a victory all throughout the process.
Well, I so appreciate you stopping today, taking the time, joining us once again to share this story. We'll continue to track with you as new details unfold, not only legally, but in your journey. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, CBN, and thank you, Billy.
We'll continue to monitor Matthew's story and we'll report back as new details unfold. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, Lucas Miles, the head of TPUSA Faith. He joins us to talk about some of the inaccurate claims surrounding Charlie Kirk's faith. Let's welcome Lucas here to the show to break it all down. Lucas Miles, appreciate you taking the time today. You've got a tweet out right now, a message on X rather, where you're addressing something that has been really percolating since Charlie Kirk's death, this claim that he was in the process of converting to Catholicism, that he identified as a Catholic. This has been something that's been perpetuated, talked about quite a bit by a number of people, but you had a fairly lengthy response to this, clarifying that that is not the case. So what was it that caused you to speak out on this?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of speculation about, Charlie's faith and his personal views. I mean, what's interesting is Charlie is probably the most documented person potentially in human history. I mean, he always was surrounded by camera crews. He was on film all day long at college events and at, giving speeches and various, public assemblies. And so, Charlie's positions are not mysterious. They're not shrouded. He talked, openly about the things he appreciated about the Catholic faith and some of the stumbling blocks that he had maybe in approaching that. And so when you have a situation like this where a figure who is as influential and as beloved as Charlie was, who is taken from us and really robbed from us so early in life, I think that there is this tendency that people want to just kind of, co-opt him and try to leverage him in some capacity for their own agenda. And Charlie loved Christians who were evangelicals and who were, true Christians who were, Catholic and Orthodox and Protestant, all backgrounds. But to try to make him something that he was not, or to not be fair with his own, personal views, I think it's deceptive. And I think that, we're seeing that from some of these figures right now. And I think it needs called out. And I wanted to provide a definitive post as his friend, as really the lead faith voice within the Turning Point ecosystem, also somebody who's close with Erica. And so I did the homework on this, and I talked to Father Klein, who's kind of this priest in question that Charlie had a relationship with, as well as Erica, to make sure that I had the story straight, before that came out. And so I think that this should be taken as the definitive view, on Charlie's spirituality moving forward.
Why do you think there's been such an effort to paint him as converting to Catholic? It's sort of a strange thing. Somebody is murdered, this horrific event happens, and the focus suddenly becomes, oh no, he's becoming a Catholic, or he was changing his theological position. Why do you think this became such a thing among so many people?
Yeah, well, first off, I'll say this. I don't think that what we're seeing from some of these groups that are out there that have been have tried to co-opt Charlie, I don't think that this is the universal Catholic perspective. I think there's a lot of very sensible people on this that say, look, if he never made a public, confession of this in some capacity, then I'm not going to read into it or take it for more than what it is. And I think that's a sensible approach. For those that are kind of moving in this direction of just trying to put words in his mouth or leverage him, and what I'm seeing a lot too is people claiming relationship with him that, stating that they were closer with him than what they actually were. I had a chance to be around Charlie. I've known him since 2020. I worked directly, for him, reporting to him for about the last year and a half of his life. It was the honor of my life to be able to do that. But there's people who have known Charlie even longer than I have. But I feel that, on this particular issue, I can speak with authority because of the those that I talk to in authority on this position directly related to it, as well as my own personal conversations with him up until the point of his death. But I would say that, it's dangerous when we see people that are trying to, kind of use the deceased to, just push their own agenda. I don't know what drives that, other than, arrogance or pride or just the desire to deceive people for, your own personal gain. But it's frightening when that happens. And so I think that, this is not about attacking any particular person, but I do want to, make sure that this is squashed before it goes any further. And that, it's clear Charlie was not converting to Catholicism. His marriage was not, convalidated in the Catholic Church. He was not taking classes, OCIA classes, to become Catholic. He had not expressed intent to take those classes, to sign up for them at a future date. He had expressed obstacles to becoming, Catholic. And I don't even know if that's the right way to say it. He expressed obstacles that he had just in his own faith that were, the things that kept him an evangelical, kept him a Protestant. And so, and again,
Marry the saints. A lot of the same things that a lot of evangelicals.
I think the infallibility of the papacy and Mariology and invocation of the saints. I think that these were challenges for him, as they are many Protestants. But look, I love a lot of things about Catholic tradition and history. Most of the reading that I do, and I think Charlie was the same way. I'm reading old, dead Catholic saints that I have, the Augustines of the world and Athanasiuses of the world that have benefited my spirituality tremendously. And so this is not about a dig on Catholics or a dig on the Catholic faith, but it is about clarifying and making sure that we're not making Charlie something that he wasn't, and that we're allowing his life and his own personal legacy and testimony to speak for his beliefs, rather than, podcasters and pundits that want to put words in his mouth.
Yeah, and by the way, this is not about a pro or anti-Catholic message. It's about the truth and reality. And there are other issues like Israel that we've talked about before, where again, people have come in with a narrative that is not accurate about where they're saying Charlie was moving or where he was. And so, there's a line here that I'll just read that I thought was very important from your message on X. You said, "Let me be clear, respect for Catholicism is not the same thing as moving towards conversion." And that's what you were saying here. I mean, this is not complicated, and you're clearing it up, and I appreciate you doing that. Lucas, as always, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That was certainly a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews you saw on today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our new documentary investigating the supernatural, angels and demons. This follows our previous documentary on miracles, and we really traveled the country again, telling fascinating stories. And we look at what Scripture reveals about angels, demons, and spiritual warfare. You can check that out right now at cbn.com/supernatural. As for this show, we'll see you again next week.